God for Lesson 6, Descent of the Goddess. In the last 4 lessons, we have used the God section to speak of the Goddess and her 3 forms as Maiden, Mother, and Crone. The Goddess is the principal focus of much of the Wiccan religion, but she is not alone. There is also the God. In future lessons, we shall use the God section to speak more about the nature of the God and his 4 major forms. In this lesson, however, we wish to speak of the interaction between the Goddess and the God and what it means to the Wiccan. Most students will be familiar with the yin-yang symbol, which has its nascence in Taoism. This famous symbol portrays the union of yin and yang energies. Yin is the feminine, reactive, spiritual energy, the Goddess. Yang is the masculine, active, physical energy, the God. In the yin-yang symbol, these 2 polar forces are shown wrapped around each other in a swirling sphere of motion. What we see in this ancient and venerable symbol is that the polar energies, yin and yang, goddess and god, spirit and matter, are not separate and opposing forces, but rather conjoined and complementary powers. In Wicca, we portray this concept through the romantic union of goddess and god, polar powers bound together through love and mutual passion. Moreover, in the yin-yang, we further see that each of the polar powers contains the seed of the other. In the dark feminine power of yin, we see the bright seed of yang. In the light masculine power of yang, we see a spot of yin's dark essence. Each by nature leads back to the other. In Wicca, we say that the Goddess gives birth to the God. The bright seed of yang energy grows within her until she gives it birth. Thus we say that material existence comes forth from spirit. And since the God, like all of us, comes from the Goddess, her essence is always within him, his soul, if you would. Thus the essence of yin is ever present in yang, for it is yang's origin. Matter comes from spirit and carries spirit within it. These 2 powers, goddess and god, yin and yang, spirit and matter, cannot be truly separated. They are opposite sides of a coin. Though there is an obverse and a reverse, still there is only one coin. This is what is meant by the sacred formula used in the consecration of the Great Rite. The goddess is not greater than the god, nor is the god greater than the goddess, but both are equal and neither is complete without the other. And just as the polar forces cannot be considered separately from one another, so too we can never be separate from them. We are not observers of the cosmic forces, but aspects of them. We are their living union, spirit in matter. We can no sooner be separate from the goddess and the god than a molecule of air can be separate within the firmament. Distinct within it, yes, but separate from it, never. You may have noticed by now that the Wiccan religion is rich in symbolism. It is not, however, rich in myth. The central myth of Wicca is the descent of the Goddess. This myth takes many forms and can be interpreted on many levels, but it always speaks to the relationship between the 2 polar forces. The myth of the descent of the Goddess is simple in format. The Goddess creates, gives birth to, or marries the God. The God dies, either literally or symbolically. The Goddess resolves to have the God back and follows or pursues him. Finding the God, the Goddess resurrects or otherwise reunites with him. From these acts, an eternal cycle of involution and evolution is established, on which the order of the universe is based. There are many versions of this myth. It is at least as old as human memory and, in reality, surely older. Sometimes the goddess and god are shown as mother and son, more often as lovers. Sometimes they are portrayed as being of the same gender, as in the story of Demeter and her daughter Persephone, or the story of Castor and his brother Polydeuces. None of these details change the basic meaning of the myth. The descent of the goddess can be taken on many levels. At its simplest and most accessible level, the myth is the story of the origin of the seasons and the establishment of the eternal cycles of time and of the earth. On another level, the descent of the goddess speaks to the immortality of the soul and to the cycle of death and rebirth, to which we are all subject through so many lifetimes. On still another level, the myth tells the story of creation and of the spirit's descent into matter through the soul, its journey of birth and rebirth, and its ultimate return to its divine origin. All of these meanings and many more express themselves through the many variations of this sacred myth. You've already encountered one version of the descent of the goddess in the creation story from the Vangelo delle Streghe. Here we see the goddess create the god out of herself and pursue him when he falls into matter. Reunited with the god by her own entry into matter via the many souls, the goddess sets up the cycles of existence, symbolized as her spinning wheel, which the god turns. Below follow several other versions of the descent of the goddess. Cybele and Attis. A mother goddess of Phrygia, in what is now Turkey, Cybele came to be identified with the Roman Magna Mater, or Great Mother. The worship of Cybele was very popular in the imperial period and attracted many followers. According to her myth, Cybele was the first being to exist, having created herself. In this dawn of existence, Cybele was androgynous, being equally male and female, for she contained the seeds of all things, and was the perfect union of the polar forces of spirit and matter. In time, Cybele decided to separate the two forces, thus creating the manifest universe. She did this by castrating herself, thus separating out the masculine or physical elements. From the severed penis, the god, Attis, grew. Attis became Cybele's consort, and they loved one another deeply. But Attis came to be killed when he was gored by a wild boar, a frequent symbol of death. Journeying to the land of death, Attis became the favorite of its queen, Persephone, who made him her consort. Meanwhile, the grief-stricken Cybele wanted Attis back, and she resolved to bring him back from the land of the dead. Cybele journeyed to the land of death and struck an arrangement with Persephone whereby they would share Attis' favors. Each year, Attis would spend 6 months in the world of the living with Cybele, and 6 months in the world of the dead with Persephone. During the 6 months Attis spent with Cybele, the earth bloomed with life. This is summer. During the 6 months Attis spent with Persephone, life withered and fell away from the earth. This is winter. Attis was often represented by a tree, and each year his rebirth was celebrated by decorating sacred trees. This is one of the origins of the Yule tree. Another notable feature of their worship is that Cybele and Attis were served by a transsexual clergy, men who imitated the goddess' example of self-castration, and thereafter lived as priestesses. Demeter and Persephone. Demeter, whose name means the mother, is a Greek goddess of the earth and agriculture. Demeter had a beautiful daughter called Kore, the maiden, whom she loved more than anything. Together Demeter and Kore tended the earth, causing it to bring forth all manner of vegetation and foliage. The god of death, Hades, also became consumed with love for Kore, though of another kind. Hades abducted Kore and bore her away to the kingdom of death, where he made her his queen, and she became known as Persephone. Not knowing what had happened to her daughter, Demeter was plunged into deepest grief. As the great mother wept, the first snow fell. Plants withered and died, and the earth fell into the first winter. Demeter searched everywhere, but could not find Kore or anyone who knew anything about her disappearance. At last, Demeter turned to great Hecate, the crone, who alone was able to tell her what had happened, for Hecate knows all. Demeter stormed into the kingdom of the dead to confront Hades and reclaim her daughter. After much ado, an agreement was reached whereby Demeter would have her daughter with her for 6 months of each year, during which she would be Kore, the maiden. This would be summer, and during this time, the two goddesses would cause the earth to thrive. The remaining 6 months, Kore would spend with Hades in the kingdom of death as Persephone. During this time, the earth would experience winter as Demeter returned to her grief. And thus, the cycle of the seasons began. Demeter and Kore Persephone returned to the earth at Eleusis near Athens, and here the two goddesses established their sacred mysteries, which were enacted yearly for many centuries. These Eleusinian mysteries were considered the most sacred rites of the ancient world, and they included many famous initiates. Seeing the devastation caused by the first winter, Demeter created agriculture, and selected the Eleusinian prince Triptolemus to disseminate the knowledge of cultivating and preserving grain throughout the earth, so that humankind need not suffer too much during her period of grief. Inanna and Dumuzi. Inanna was the patron goddess of the ancient Sumerian city of Uruk, or Erech, in Mesopotamia. Dumuzi was Inanna's mortal consort who served her as king of Uruk. Inanna loved Dumuzi greatly, and his life as her consort was very sweet. But Dumuzi came to be killed by a wild boar and descended into the land of death. Inanna was wild with grief when she heard of Dumuzi's death and resolved to follow him to the land of the dead and bring him back out of it. Inanna was sure that she could persuade Ereshkigal, the queen of the dead, to release Dumuzi, for Ereshkigal was Inanna's sister. But as she ventured into the realm of death, Inanna came to 7 gates. At each of the 7 gates, Inanna was compelled to surrender one item of clothing or jewelry, until at last she entered the land of the dead naked, just as one enters the land of the living. Though the details vary in different versions, Inanna managed to free Dumuzi and return with him to the world of the living, thus establishing the cycle of rebirth. In later versions, the two goddesses agree to share Dumuzi, who must spend half of the year with Inanna, summer, and half of the year with Ereshkigal, winter. In time, Sumerian civilization came to be dominated by the Semitic peoples. The Semites kept the myths of the Sumerians, but gave the deities Semitic names. Thus, Inanna was later known as Ishtar, while Dumuzi came to be known as Tammuz. Ereshkigal the Semites called Elat, or the goddess. Later still, the Greeks came to rule Mesopotamia. They identified Ishtar with Aphrodite. Tammuz the Greeks called Adonis, or the Lord, while they identified Elat with Persephone. Isis and Osiris. Isis and Osiris are the Greek names for the ancient Egyptian deities Aset and Asar, whose worship dates from the earliest historical times. Children of Earth, or Geb, and Sky, or Nuit, Isis and Osiris ruled over Egypt in love and peace, teaching the Egyptians all of the arts and sciences of civilization. But their brother Set grew jealous of Osiris and resolved to kill him. Set invited Osiris to a great feast and proposed a contest, producing a marvelous painted chest made in the shape of a man. Set offered the chest to whichever man fit in it exactly. All of the male guests tried to fit in the chest, but Set had deliberately had it made so that it would only fit Osiris. When Osiris' turn came, he fit in the chest exactly, and Set slammed down the heavy lid and sealed it. This was the first mummy case. Then Set threw the mummy case into the Nile so that Osiris drowned. Thereafter Set made himself king of Egypt. Set wished to have Isis as his queen, but she turned herself into a white bird and flew away. Overcoming her grief, Isis searched all over Egypt for the mummy case that contained her husband's body. At last she found the mummy case, caught in the roots of a great tree on the island of Byblos. Obtaining the mummy case, Isis performed powerful magic to resurrect Osiris from the dead, and she conceived a child by the revivified Osiris. Thereafter Osiris became the lord of the dead, and Horus was born as his son and reincarnation on earth. There are many versions of this story. In some versions, Set hacks Osiris' body into 14 parts, and Isis must reassemble it before she can resurrect Osiris. Sometimes the two versions are put together. The most popular and enduring of all Egyptian deities, Isis was called the Lady of 10,000 Names. Her followers stressed that all deities were manifestations of a single spiritual truth. Icaean religion was very popular in the Roman Empire. Today, the principal center of Icaean worship is the Fellowship of Isis, or Aset Shemsu, which is the largest goddess-centered organization in the Western world. Izanagi and Izanami. In this Japanese Shinto version of the myth, the sexual polarities are reversed as the god pursues the goddess. Izanagi, or the inviter, and Izanami, or the invited, are the Japanese creator couple. In the beginning, Izanagi struck his spear into the ocean. The head of the spear shattered, becoming the Japanese islands. Izanami danced around the spear, and Izanagi pursued her. At length, Izanagi caught Izanami, and they became consorts. Izanami and Izanagi were very happy and had many children. But Izanami's last child was the god of fire, and she was burned so badly during his birth that she died. Izanagi was grief-stricken, and he resolved to follow his wife into the afterworld and bring her back. Izanagi entered the land of the dead, and, finding Izanami, begged her to come back with him. But Izanami refused. Izanagi pressed her, and Izanami revealed that her outer form had begun to decay. Shamed by this admission, Izanami chased Izanagi out of the realm of the dead at the head of a band of spirits. Even more grief-stricken than before, Izanagi went to a nearby river to ritually purify himself after his contact with the dead. As he performed his ablutions, several new deities were born, notably the sun goddess, Amaterasu. Although Izanagi could not bring Izanami back into the world of the living in her old form, Amaterasu might be thought of as her mother reborn, thus completing the mythic cycle.